The transition into adulthood certainly has a lot of challenges. It seems like there's a point where you look up and your whole life has changed drastically. One day you're a teenager and the only worry you have is how you're going to ask somebody to prom. Well, it feels like the very next day you have a car payment, rent to pay, and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of your life and future. In just a moment, you feel a pressure on your shoulders. Every decision you make is different because it could change your whole future. You have to worry about what you spend money on, and you have to worry about whether you'll have the newest thing like your friends or whether you won't because you don't have a lot of money. In all of this, you hope that you're becoming the type of person that your ideal spouse would marry. And in all of this, it's frustrating because nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about how to handle money or be in a marriage relationship or even to do your taxes. How are you supposed to figure out life and carry the pressure of the future? I'm Josh Cave, and I've asked this exact same question. In fact, I've spent my entire life asking questions, and those questions have led me to a lot of study and earning a bachelor's degree in Bible and theology. And just recently, my wife Molli and I have considered the weight of adulthood, and so I want to help you understand how to handle the newfound challenges and weight of becoming an adult. Before we get into that, let's cue the music. Welcome to the AfterYouth Podcast, where we answer questions so that you can lose doubt and live confidently for God. We pray that this episode helps you in your Christian walk. If you enjoy our content, please support us by subscribing wherever you're listening or watching and give us a 5-star review. When you do that, you help people all over the world lose doubt and live with confidence. If you have a question you would like us to answer in one of our episodes, you can reach out on one of our social media platforms or email us at afteryouthpod@gmail.com. Let's jump into the episode. One of the frustrating things about adult life for me is that people never talk about the difficulties. Like, whenever I first really became an adult and was living out on my own, I was trying to figure out money. I was trying to figure out how to handle it, how to use it better. And it really stunk because, nobody talks about those things. Everybody's worried about talk about salaries and all these different things. And I totally get it. But it was frustrating for me because I was trying to navigate this area of life and just nobody talked about it. Nobody shared how you're supposed to deal with that. They just kind of throw you in the deep end of the pool and say, well, I hope you figure it out so you don't go bankrupt, And that's just one of the many areas of life that we carry such a burden with us. As an early young adult, I worried about who I was going to marry. I was worried that, I was the right person to be marryable, that I wasn't some jerk that nobody wanted to be with, or, even just worrying that I just need to make sure I'm not with the wrong person when I find the person I'm supposed to be with. And you have all these questions, all these things that you carry around in your head. And so today, the question I really wanted to get into is, what is this weight that we carry as adults and how do we deal with it?
So what is that weight for you?
Yeah, I think the weight for me, and I think it's similar for everybody, the weight that I carry comes from the different roles that I have in life. So for me, I'm a husband, obviously. I'm a homeowner just in the last year. I'm an employee, a podcast host and producer, but there's all these different roles that I have in my life, and each of those requires something from me. Being a husband, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes caring about your needs and focusing on you. But my employer, it takes me waking up on time. It takes me doing the job description and doing it well enough that they reward me with pay. They give me the pay that I need for it. But whenever you become a homeowner, you have to worry about making sure all the things in the house are fixed, we had a roof leak that we found a couple of weeks ago, trying to get that fixed and worrying about all these different things. And so I think for me, the weight that I carry and the burden that I have in adulthood is because of all these different roles. It's making sure that I'm doing all the right things for all these different areas. And you could throw a ton of small subcategories into this. Money, you could throw cars into it, making sure we have working vehicles. Just one thing after another that you have to worry about to be able to maintain functioning life as an adult. And whenever you're a teenager, whenever you're still living at your parents' house, you really don't have to worry about all those things. You have to worry about some. You have some bills to pay, some things to do. If your car broke down, you call your parents and they come pick you up. They can handle some of that load, some of that pressure that life throws at you. But as you transition out and as you just transition into this new life, but yeah, it can be really challenging, but the weight for me has to do with the roles in my life. And some of those get heavy whenever things are going wrong. Whenever there's a roof leak, like it gets stressful because you have to worry about that particular problem. It's similar to whenever you're on a boat or something and you have a bunch of holes. I would picture like a cartoon, where all these different pinholes start popping up, and you're taking tape to one, tape to another, and you're holding out all your limbs trying to hold all these things up. And a lot of times that's how adulthood can feel is, the water's trying to come in from all these different areas. This is trying to fix every problem that comes up as it comes up. And that can be burdensome. It can be stressful. It can be frustrating at times. Not everybody has the same roles and such that I do. I've got a couple of buddies who are in their early 20s and they still live with their parents. And their burdens might not be things that are happening right now. Maybe they're not worried about a home. They're not worried about their spouse. They're probably worried about their future. They've still got car payments. They've still got some minor bills that they have to pay. So they still have to work a job and be consistent with that. But in most cases, like, they're worried about what their future is going to look like. They're worried that they're making the right choices for tomorrow, that they're doing the right thing so that they can find a spouse, or trying to make sure they're dating the right people. And so in my situation, my burden comes from the roles that I have right now. But in their case, their worry and their stress might come from the roles that they will have, and trying to make sure they're doing the right things now to set them up for future success. And so regardless of where you find yourself, whether you're, in my situation, in your mid-20s, with some of your life kind of figured out already, or if you're in your early 20s where you're trying to figure out what the next steps are and doing them right. I think there's burdens and there's different weights in either of those situations that are completely different from when you're a teenager.
Yeah. I had a history professor that my fall freshman year, he was very much a Debbie Downer, but he made the comment, he was like, just preparing you going into, young adulthood. Most of us, because it was freshman history class, most of us were fresh out of high school. And he was like, you're going to try to juggle college, career, friendships, relationships, personal life, health, all of these things. You're going to drop the ball. Like, you can't manage all of those. And it was very, disturbing as a fresh 18-year-old hearing these things, but it's so true, especially starting out, like, having to figure out these things, having to go to the doctor's office by yourself, It was like, man, it hit hard once it hit. And I was very grateful to have parents that, they helped me ease into it, but still easing into that, just as, as easy as they made it for me, was still, nerve wracking. We talk about all this weight that we carry, but why do we carry this weight?
To me, part of it is just being a responsible human being. Nobody that's totally irresponsible, nobody that doesn't care what their future holds, they don't carry burdens. They don't stress about things. They're just focused on the moment right here and now. And there's part of that that's good. God called us to not worry about tomorrow, not worry about the next day. And a lot of that burden, a lot of that stress comes from that, trying to control what we can't control. But I also think there is a healthy part of it. For people that are mature, people that are maturing, that are trying to figure out life, trying to piece together what life is going to be like. You try to be responsible and you try to do the right things. You're worried about it because you want to do right. And so I think that's a big part of it. Another part of it, I think, especially, I can speak for men in this part of it. As men, we're called to be people that bring home the bacon. We're called to be providers. And whenever you have that calling on your life, there is a burden to do that thing. You have a burden to provide for your family, to bring home the bacon, to make money, to have a skill that you bring to the table that somebody else will pay you money for. And so I think that is a healthy burden to carry, that you need to work a job. You need to work the right job. You need to make the right amount of money. And so I guess you could say there are really two types of weight and two reasons why we carry it. We can either try to control the things that we can't control, which is unhealthy, and we're not supposed to do that. We have to focus on the here and now the best we can. But there is also a healthy burden of responsibility of saying, you know what, I have to plant today so that we can eat tomorrow. And so we have to balance these things, and we have to make sure that we don't tip the scales too far to one side, which I think, I'm guilty of as much as anybody, trying to control all the different areas of life. And you just can't do it, no matter how bad you try. But being able to pour yourself into the right burdens and say, you know what, I'm going to give as much as I can to my work because they're going to help me provide for tomorrow. It's such an important thing. And it is a healthy weight to carry. It's a healthy weight because it has to deal with responsibility. It has to deal with bearing the burden that God called you to long before we were here. The Molli, from the perspective of a woman, because obviously I can only talk on this one side about the burden and responsibility that men carry. Are there areas that you face a burden in your life?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about now having the perspective of marriage, but I kind of want to go back to when I was in college and freshly graduated from college, those things, because I know there's a lot of people right now that are in that specific situation. And for me, like, as a female, a Christian female, I think part of young adulthood, going into adulthood, I struggled with the balance between wanting to go ahead and continue with my future because I didn't know what my future held for me. I didn't know when you were coming along, you know, but also wanting to, in this culture of feminism, which I'm not saying don't advocate for yourself and stuff, but in this culture, this worldly culture of feminism, trying to balance that and speak for yourself, but also have those Christian, I guess you could say Proverbs 31 woman standards. And so for me, that was just always trying to find, I wanted to get a house because while we were dating, I wanted to go ahead and get a house because I didn't know when we were going to, get married or even get engaged and things. And I was going to, I was paying rent, and that was another thing. Like, I was living on my own. Like, I was like, for a minute, I was like, is that okay? Like, me being a Christian woman, living on my own, things like that. And I know that sounds silly to think about, but, I wanted to be able to prepare myself to be respectful and dependent on my husband, but also be independent in the same. And I know that it's kind of a catch-22 when you think about it.
Yeah, but almost like you had a weight of like trying to balance being a respectful future wife with trying to do things to prepare yourself for success.
Yeah. Like, do I, look out for myself and go ahead and claim that independence because I don't know when, a spouse is going to come along? Or do I wait and do all of those things, get a house, get things like that for once I have a spouse? Like, what's the right answer there?
Yeah. And I would think for sure that's difficult. And I would even think, especially for women, once you have a kid, I think there's a completely different burden that adds on top of that. Me and my pastor were at lunch actually earlier today, and we're talking about some of these burdens of life and some of these things that we all carry. And he mentioned that He has burdens and things that he carries, but his wife, now that they have kids, has this incredible burden for the kids that he can't understand, and about their life and their future and all these different things. And I think from experience, every single one of us could say that of our mom in almost all situations, that your mom has had an incredible burden for you and for your future. Not that your dad doesn't, but it's just different. And so on top of what you said about being in early young adulthood and trying to balance independence with wanting to be respectful, that there's also a difference in once you're married, once you have a kid, there's a new burden, a burden of caring for a child and making sure that that child has everything it needs for success, where a man might not worry about that as much.
So, Josh, if everybody carries the weight and struggles with it, what are we supposed to do about it?
I've had a pretty simple philosophy that I have to remind myself sometimes. And as I say all this, one of the reasons I wrote this episode this week is because the burdens of life have been a lot recently. And it's been difficult to carry and try to figure out. So I say all this as somebody that's still trying to figure it out, still trying to understand adult life. But all that to say, I've had a pretty simple philosophy that I've reminded myself of occasionally. Tony Horton in the workout videos P90X, he says, "Do your best and forget the rest." And it's kind of a silly mantra, he repeats it over and over in his videos. But the point of it in the videos is you give everything you can, and if you mess up, if you make a mistake, if it's not as good as you want it to be, you forget about it. You move past it. You keep going. It's always helped me keep everything in perspective, because in my life, there's only so much I can do. And that's one of the reasons we're called to trust God, is because we cannot do everything on our own. We can't fix tomorrow. You can try all you want. You can do everything in your physical power, but you cannot change tomorrow. All you can do is do your best today with what God has given you, and let tomorrow happen. And if it doesn't work out well, if something bad happens, you forget about it and you keep trying to do your best. And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. I go through life. I pray about big decisions. I make the best decisions I can in the moment, and I forget the rest. If it doesn't work perfectly, we just move on and we trust God with the next decision. But it's similar to a Mark Batterson reference. He talks about it in a lot of his books. He says, we pray like it depends on God, and we work like it depends on us. And what that does is, again, it puts in perspective that we can only control what we can control. You don't get bonus points at the end of the day for carrying the burdens of life. You don't. We don't. The world doesn't give out prizes for who carried the biggest weight or who struggled the most with the weight on their life. What we have to do is we have to give those things to God the best we can. Everybody carries weight. Everybody carries burdens of life. And so we pray and we give it to God the best that we can. And then we do work and we focus on the things that we can do, because I don't know if you remember, if you were a Christian in high school, there was always jokes made about praying about a test or something. You'd go in and you'd go in a youth group or something. And you'd say, "Hey, I've got a big test coming up." And then somebody would make a joke like, "Well, did you study for it?" And the expectation was, well, maybe if I pray about it, God will help me, even though I didn't study at all. And we all know that's really not how it works, because we pray like it depends on God and we work like it depends on us. We have to fulfill our end of the bargain. And so if you're praying for God to give you financial success, but you never show up for work, you get what you ask for. You have to pray like it depends on God. God, help me to make the right decisions. Help me to do the right things. But God, I'm going to work like it depends on me. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to give my best at work. I'm going to fulfill every expectation that they have for me. And then we're going to believe that God's going to take care of the things that I cannot control. But more than anything, I want to tell you right now that if you're worried about your future and you're working and you're doing the best you can, I'm proud of you. It's easy to beat yourself up, and I do it more than I should. But it's easy to beat yourself up over feeling like you're carrying the weight of the world, and you're frustrated with yourself. You're frustrated with what you're trying to do, and it's not all working out. It's okay. There are going to be bad days. There are going to be days that are better. There are going to be days that are worse than what you're going through. But I'm proud of you because most people don't care about their future. They don't care about what happens tomorrow. They take no responsibility. But you've listened to this whole thing, and you've had frustration. You've had this weight of the world on your shoulders because you care. It matters that you care enough to face those challenges. And that doesn't mean that you should go on carrying the burden of things you can't control. Like I said, give it to God. Give it to God the best you can, and you do the rest of the work. But you should be proud also that you want to build a quality life for yourself and for your family, and that you worry about how you're going to serve God in this world. And so, as we live our lives, remember those mantras. Remember those little terms that hopefully will help you get through the days that the weight feels like a lot. That you remember to do your best and forget the rest, and you remember to pray like it depends on God or work like it depends on you. And hopefully at that point, you can give everything that you have and pray with everything that you have, and you can trust God for your future, but work hard today. But that's everything for this episode. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.